on International Trade. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on September 16th, the committee is resuming a study of Canadian women in international trade. We have with us today Botanical Paperworks, Heidi Reimer-Epp, Chief Executive Officer and Co-Founder, Canadian Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, Adriana Vega, Vice President, Government Affairs. From the Canadian Women's Foundation, Karen Campbell, Senior Director, Community Initiatives. Perel Centre for Women's Enterprise, Rosalind Locker, Founder and Chief Executive Officer. And from the University of Toronto, Leiken Liu, Associate Director, the Institute of Gender and the Economy, Rothman School of Management. So everybody pretty much, other than one witness, is here. Oh, I got one more. YWCA Hamilton, Jaija Hamidou, Vice President, Economic Development. So we have a lot of witnesses on here today, so really appreciate that. So we'll open the floor with Ms. Reimer-Epp. Everyone has 5 minutes, please. You don't have to use the 5 minutes if you don't want to, but you'll have up to 5 minutes, so please. Okay, Ms. Reimer-Epp, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Heidi Reimer-Epp, and I am CEO and co-founder of Botanical Paperworks. And we manufacture plantable seed paper, an eco-paper that is embedded with seeds. And when you plant it, it grows into flowers, herbs, or vegetables and leaves no waste behind. We make the paper from post-consumer waste and then produce a wide range of products from plantable packaging, promotional products, and consumer goods. And I'm also on the Manitoba Advisory Board of CME, the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, and a sponsor of the CME Women in Manufacturing Initiative. I started my business 27 years ago after looking up and seeing the inevitable glass ceiling in my corporate job. Entrepreneurship offered me the chance to bypass the glass ceiling as I could build the company that I wanted, one where hard work and effort were rewarded, regardless of gender, race, and other factors. Throughout these almost 3 decades, we have scaled by diversifying our product line and finding new markets for our paper products, including those in export markets. And we've always considered the world to be our marketplace and have been held up as an example of a successful Canadian exporter. In my time today, I'd like to share 2 initiatives that assist women in business and one that is an impediment to growth. First, in the early years of starting Botanical Paperworks, we were lucky to find support at the Women's Enterprise Centre of Manitoba, now called WeMB. The center helped with early stage needs such as business planning, early stage financing, and growth mentoring. Their support got Botanical Paperworks through those first 5 years, a period of time in which it has been widely reported that the vast majority of new businesses fail. So this is my first recommendation, that the government continue to fund centers like WeMB and their counterparts across Canada because they boost the likelihood of a business making it through the first 3 to 5 years. Then, as we were seeking to scale, Botanical Paperworks accessed funding through 3 important government programs. First, the Industrial Research Assistance Program, where they assigned us an IRAP engineering consultant and provided matched funding that allowed us to hire our first engineer. Together with the IRAP consultant and our new hire, we brought about significant process improvements to our manufacturing process, scaled our output, and lowered the cost of manufacturing. These improvements readied us for new growth and fueled our launch onto the international stage. We also have accessed the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Program, SR&ED, which has offset some of the risk associated with R&D and gave us important financial incentives for this woman-owned and led Canadian company to keep pushing with our scientific advancement. And the other program that hugely moved the needle for us was the 2019 award of a grant through the Women Entrepreneurship Fund from Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. With this grant, we invested heavily in our website and our internal ERP system. The new website was created to grow our markets of Canada, US, Europe, and UK, and was tailored to the different customer needs of each region. So my second recommendation is that the government continue to fund programs like IRAP, SR&ED, and WEF, as they are indeed drivers of growth for women entrepreneurs. This brings me to my final point of what not to do, and it has to do with regulatory inefficiencies within the government. After we launched our new website in 2019, we attended multiple trade shows in Europe and the UK with the assistance of Can Export, and business was growing in these markets. But when seed import regulations changed in early 2020, unrelated to COVID, we now required an ongoing high volume of phytosanitary certificates from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. This proved to be an impossible roadblock because we couldn't get the FIDOs in a timely manner. The CFIA takes up to 2 weeks to manually produce the documents in an era where our customers expect a same or next day Amazon-like delivery experience. And we were set up to deliver that customer experience in the UK and EU, but there proved no way around the CFIA's processing time. Momentum stalled, and the export boom that we could have experienced when the European market reopened after COVID was almost completely lost. Our export business to this day is hampered by the lack of quick phytosanitary certificate issuance via a modern online portal. So this is my third point. To grow in export markets and be competitive internationally, Canadian women-owned and led businesses need to be able to rely on government agencies as allies who recognize and value what is important to business when dealing with the inevitable challenges of export regulations. To accomplish this, they need to modernize outdated systems and rethink inflexible policies. I am sincerely grateful for the support of the Canadian government over the years at crucial and critical times in the life of my business, and this opportunity to recommend ways to unleash the growth of women-owned and women-led manufacturers and exporters. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Vega, please, for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members, for inviting us. The Canadian Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, we thank the committee for the invitation for undertaking this important study. CVCA represents some of the largest investors in Canada with more than 350 member firms and 3,300 individuals. Our members are the investors behind the creation of thousands of jobs, the advancements of innovative technologies, and the strengthening of local economies across the country. Private capital supports Canada's entrepreneurship, supporting businesses from startup all the way through to global expansion. CVCA is dedicated to fostering diversity and inclusion within the sector. We do this through various programs, including those supported by the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, or WES, with government funding, as well as initiatives such as the Canadian Women in Private Capital Awards, WES, with the Private Capital Awards, which is an industry recognition that promotes visibility of women investors, as well as the CVCA internship program, which is now in its 4th year. Thanks to the Inclusive Women in Venture Capital Initiative, supported by WES, CVCA has rolled out programs designed to support and empower women in private capital. Our focus has been on 3 main areas, and I'll discuss each of these in turn. First, education. We seek to promote greater representation of women in private capital through skills training, providing participants who are mid-career women with the knowledge and networks necessary to succeed in this competitive field. CVCA's programs like Women Venture Forward offer targeted education and access to mentorship with industry leaders. To date, this program, which is delivered in partnership with the Ivey Business School, has enabled 60 women from across Canada from diverse backgrounds, locations, and stage in their careers, helping them find pathways to enter the industry. Yet we know that demand far exceeds supply, so there has been ample interest in our upcoming 3rd cohort, which was coincidentally announced today. The second pillar is diverse talent pipeline. We know that developing a strong pipeline of diverse talent is essential to the inclusivity in our industry, but also its success. An example of initiatives that foster this pipeline is our internship program, which places 10 to 20 students annually from underrepresented groups, including women, across Canada into firms in our membership. And lastly, research. This year, we will roll out a DEI benchmark study to assess progress in diversity, equity, and inclusion within the private capital industry, and this will build on former insights from a survey in 2021. By providing fresh data on inclusion, it will enable organizations to identify areas for improvement, but beyond data collection, it will underscore the direct correlation between diverse workforces and increased profitability, offering insights into the market drivers for DEI. We're now in our 2nd year of the Inclusive Women in Venture Capital Initiative, and already we are seeing early successes, with 2 participants starting their own funds. One has almost reached their first capital raise with a focus on LGBTQ founders, while the second one is focused on Black women entrepreneurs. These attest to the early ripple effects that having women in decision-making roles can achieve for the ecosystem at large. There remain important challenges, but there is reason for optimism. Today, we see women at the helm of private equity firms in Canada. Venture capital companies in our membership are also now built around the investment philosophy that women-led ventures succeed more often and have better returns than all male founder teams. Women have traditionally raised less capital compared to men. In 2020, only 2% of the total proportion of venture capital dollars went to women founders, compared to 9% that went to female and male co-founded companies. We're no stranger to these challenges. In Canada, in 21, 4% of all investment dollars went to women-founded companies. But this is improving. Only by the first half of this year in 2024, that 4% proportion has gone up to 12%. We can expect ebbs and flows, but this trend is positive, and we will continue to track it and improve upon. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Campbell, for up to 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. My name is Karen Campbell, and I'm Acting Vice President and Senior Director of Community Initiatives at the Canadian Women's Foundation. I'm joining you today from my home office in London, Ontario, on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Attawandaron peoples. The Canadian Women's Foundation has been a national leader in advancing gender justice and equality for over 30 years. We've contributed more than $260 million to support over 3,300 life-transforming programs across Canada, including investments of more than $12 million since 1997 in women-centered economic development programs. These efforts support women and gender-diverse entrepreneurs from the most underserved communities to launch and grow businesses, build financial independence, and achieve sustainable livelihoods. With support from the Government of Canada's Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy, we've been able to continue this critical work, investing $3.5 million in our national Partnering for Feminist Entrepreneurship initiative, which is building the field of feminist entrepreneurship in collaboration with 7 community partners. This initiative builds on the work of our highly effective investment readiness program, funded by Employment and Social Development Canada, through which we supported 90 diverse social purpose enterprises led by women and gender diverse people to join Canada's innovation and social finance ecosystem. We welcome the committee's invitation to speak to the barriers and opportunities women and gender diverse entrepreneurs face in the trade economy. We commend Canada's global leadership in the development and promotion of gender inclusive free trade agreements, many of which include provisions to support women in business. But this is not the only avenue through which we can address the gender gap in international trade. Canada must look beyond free trade agreements to ensure that women and gender diverse entrepreneurs, especially those from equity deserving communities, can see their businesses thrive in domestic and international markets. Women and gender diverse business owners, especially those from equity deserving communities, face several challenges in their efforts to access global markets. First is a lack of access to financing. Lack of financing is a persistent barrier for women and gender diverse entrepreneurs, and equitable access to capital is necessary if these businesses are to scale and compete internationally. Mandatory customs brokers, high customs, transportation, and logistical costs are a disadvantage for small-scale entrepreneurs. High logistical costs also present significant challenges for businesses that are just starting out and that need to make smaller shipments. Women and gender diverse entrepreneurs are often concentrated in lower growth sectors, limiting their opportunities in high growth industries like tech and manufacturing. These entrepreneurs often lack networks and mobility. Trade missions are crucial for expanding into new markets, yet many women and gender diverse entrepreneurs face financial and logistical barriers in accessing these opportunities. These entrepreneurs also lack access to relevant market information, specific market data that's relevant to small business owners and solopreneurs. And this limits their ability to make informed decisions about which products to import or export. And in general, a lack of access to training and support programs. There are not enough training and support programs specifically designed for small-scale international trade, leaving new entrepreneurs with inadequate knowledge to navigate the complex import-export regulatory environments and processes that Ms. Reimer-Epp was speaking to earlier. These barriers are particularly acute for racialized and immigrant women and gender diverse entrepreneurs. Immigrant women are critical to export success. They have firsthand knowledge of emerging markets and they're inclined to start new businesses in non-traditional sectors, but they need support with innovations that could help scale and grow their companies. So what can we do to close this gender gap? Without continued federal programs like the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy and targeted support for women-owned businesses, the progress made by women in international markets risks being undone because these businesses have not had adequate time or supports to reach sustainability. To close the gender gap in international trade, federal funding programs must be extended and new mechanisms introduced to provide financial and operational support for women-led businesses, particularly in high-growth sectors. Targeted financial support is also necessary. We would like to see more enhanced targeted funding mechanisms for businesses led by women and gender diverse people to access capital, focusing on those in emerging and high potential sectors. And looking at inclusive trade mission participation, ensuring that women and gender diverse entrepreneurs are consistently represented in all trade missions and that they have the financial support to support their participation, especially for those from equity deserving groups. And finally, developing specialized supports for immigrant and racialized women entrepreneurs who have the knowledge and networks to enter emerging markets but require assistance in scaling their businesses globally. In closing, we must continue to build an inclusive and equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem. With sustained government action and private sector collaboration, Canada can unlock the potential of women and gender diverse entrepreneurs and in turn strengthen the economy for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lockyer for up to 5 minutes, please. You need to unmute yourself, Ms. Lockyer.
The button was covered up. Sorry.
That's okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the panelists. I am very happy to be here today. I'm Rosalind Lockyer, founder and CEO of PERO Women's Enterprise Canada, member of WEOC, the Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada, of which Heidi spoke of earlier. Also a hub member for WEC, Women's Enterprise Knowledge Hub for Ontario. And I really appreciate this opportunity to witness on your study for Canadian women in international trade. Established in 1995, PERO Women's Enterprise Canada is an award-winning organization that supports Prosper Circles, the largest women-centered peer lending network in North America. PERO's area of expertise is supporting diverse businesswomen at all levels of business growth in urban, rural, and remote communities of Canada. For 30 years, PERO has helped tens of thousands of women entrepreneurs to start, grow, and scale their businesses. As part of our strategy, PERO promotes the benefits of exporting, but we also provide training and funding. And when we go on a trade mission with women to the United States, we provide pre-mission preparation, support during the mission, and post-mission training and hands-on support. Vital to sustain success, PERO provides continued encouragement and follow-up assistance funded by FedNor and FedDev, regional development agencies in Ontario. PERO has supported over 55 women entrepreneurs on 7 PERO trade missions into the United States. While providing funding, we have been able to put $200,000 directly into women's pockets to support their travel on these trade missions. In addition, PERO provides additional funding through our Prosper Circles, our peer lending network, and through our WEOC partnership as Ontario's representative of the Women's National Loan Fund, both funded under the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy. Paro's trade missions afford Canadian businesswomen an opportunity to grow and expand their businesses through exporting. Increasing trade in this way will help enhance Canada's overall productivity and economic growth, not only in Ontario, but across Canada. We started in Ontario, so that's why so much of our support comes from Ontario. But through the Women's Enterprise Strategy, we have been able to spread our team across Canada and so develop our peer lending circles, of which we have 225 now, plus across Canada. So again, support from the government. Paro's trade missions are really important. I think the potential for Canadian women-owned businesses to succeed in international markets by gaining access to supplier diversity programs is vital if they're going to move forward and build bigger businesses. And also to increase the amount of exports and imports that we have in Canada. The trade missions that we do are in the United States, and the biggest vehicle of support that we use is WeBank, and those supplier diversity conferences have about 4,500 attendees, which include the women entrepreneurs, but also the Fortune 500 corps and the government agencies that support all of these entities. To this end, I'd like to make a few recommendations to strengthen the potential for women businesses to export. Number one, Paro can continue to build on the foundational work that we achieved during women's first trade mission experiences and provide advanced support strategies for future development. But to tap into these opportunities, there needs to be sufficient funding for the travel and accommodation and for the registration and the certification and for the support persons. Number two.
I'm sorry, Ms. Locker, if you could please end your comments.
Sure. I just want to.
And possibly what you have remaining, you can quite possibly use as an answer. You want me to give her more time?
Okay, I can do that.
I just don't want to
we
take away from
invite
your
government
time.
representatives to travel with us to our next Paro trade mission to WeBank in New Orleans in June, so you can see the real story.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Liu, please.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Vice Chairs, and committee members. My name is Lechin Liu. I'm the Associate Director of the Institute for Gender and the Economy at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. CIIT is a research center dedicated to using rigorous research to transform conversations around gender equality. For the past few years, CIIT has been a key member of the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. At CIIT, our work focuses on identifying the systemic barriers women entrepreneurs face, highlighting the unique experiences of women entrepreneurs from marginalized communities, especially racialized and Indigenous women, and amplifying inclusive intersectional approaches to address these unique needs. Additionally, we have developed a series of case studies on women-founded, women-owned, and women-led businesses, offering actionable insights that inspire more inclusive and impactful business innovation. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical challenges we have identified through our research. So first, discussions on entrepreneurship often narrowly focus on high-tech, high-growth businesses. While these areas are important, this narrow view overlooks the broader spectrum of entrepreneurship, such as small and medium-sized enterprise and self-employment, which are sectors where women are overrepresented. In Canada, SMEs account for almost 90% of private sector employment, and in contrast, fewer than 10% of companies with 100 employees or more are owned by women. Supporting women entrepreneurs requires recognizing and addressing the unique challenges faced by different types of businesses, each of which play a vital role in the economy. Second, much of the current research and policy initiatives treat women entrepreneurs as a single homogeneous group, overlooking the distinct challenges faced by women of color, Indigenous women, immigrant women, and those from other marginalized communities. For example, studies show that Black and immigrant women are more likely to rely on family networks for capital, while institutional support often fails to meet their needs. Similarly, research indicates that government recovery programs intended to support entrepreneurship after natural disasters may have unintentional consequence on the reinforcing racial divides in the U.S. This underscores the need for intersectional approaches to entrepreneurship policies and research, one that considers the compounded effects of different forms of inequality women entrepreneurs experience, and better implementation of GBA Plus to help collect and use intersectional data to design targeted and more effective policy and programs as needed to meet the distinctive needs of the diverse community of women entrepreneurs. Third, social and cultural biases underpin many of the challenges women entrepreneurs face, shaping their experiences and outcomes as business owners. These biases are heavily influenced by socialized attitudes and behaviors. Research shows that from a young age, women and men are encouraged to develop different sets of skills and knowledge, or we call human capital. This contributes to gender differences in how entrepreneurs identify business opportunities and pursue growth, leading to very distinct entrepreneurial pathways. Gender stereotypes also influence how others perceive women's dedication and competence in entrepreneurial spaces, and biases are embedded in programs and processes, affecting structural access to critical resources necessary for business growth. Growing evidence suggests that women and men receive differential treatment in assessing loans and venture capital. Women are often judged by different criteria and held to higher standards than their male counterparts. Women-led startups also tend to receive less funding, even when they deliver the same pitch as male-led startups. In conclusion, while progress has been made, much more remains to be done to better support women entrepreneurs. Policies and initiatives must recognize the diverse pathways that women take and address the systemic barriers and persistent stereotypes they face. Achieving this requires strategic investments in gender disaggregated data collection, deeper analysis, and co-creation with women entrepreneurs to develop more gender transformative policies and programs. Thank you for these opportunities, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Amadou, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and all members of the committee for the invitation to speak to you as a part of the study on initiatives to assist women-owned and led businesses across Canada to grow and succeed. My name is Khadija Hamidou. I am the Vice President of Economic Development at YWCA Hamilton. Every year, we serve over 10,000 women, gender diverse people, and families. I want to first thank and congratulate you for taking on this study, especially during Women's History Month. And I'll quickly note that this year's theme is Women at Work, Economic Growth, Past, Present, and Future. At YWCA Hamilton, we prove every day that women are economic drivers in their communities, at whichever scale they operate, and that women's economic empowerment is critical to the overall success of our forever changing labor market and Canadian economy. This year alone, women entrepreneurs in Canada account for around 18.4% of businesses, with most of these being small to medium-sized enterprises. Although this percentage is quite low, we know that women are likely to reinvest in their own communities. Women and gender diverse people bring new ideas and creative problem-solving solutions to the workforce, and additionally, women's prosperity almost always leads to their children's prosperity. Today, you've already heard from other organizations in this committee that have international reach and firsthand experience on the barriers to international markets. Based off of our expertise through our YWCA programming, I'm going to spend some time sharing on the necessary investments required in order to build a pipeline of innovative women entrepreneurs. We need bold ideas, stable, and a whole house approach to find sustainable ways to promote women's advancement in business. This must start at a local community approach so that the growth and scale up businesses lead to high quality, diverse, and women owned and led companies entering international markets. We know that women continue to be left behind in STEM and in the skilled trades. We also know that these male dominated industries have real potential for secure, high demand jobs with good wages that can lead to the sort of inspiration that enables women to join innovative companies where they can grow their skills and eventually take the leap themselves to begin a business. The Women Entrepreneurship Fund addresses barriers to accessing capital for women who are looking to grow their business. With $7 billion invested in Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy Initiative funded by Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada, complemented by the investments in women's employment success in non-traditional fields, we recommend the following: sustainable, long-term investments and reinvestments in successful programs, closing the gender digital divide by continued investment in skill building, access to mentors and allies, encourage diversity in supply chains, and promote this as a corporate and intergovernmental supply chain. Promote alternative models such as cooperatives and collectives, which are business models more often adopted by women. And finally, prioritizing women-led and owned businesses for government procurement. Our recommendations are exemplified through YWCA's Power Up Live and Explore program, which is successfully delivered in 5 provinces across Canada. On that national scale, over 1,000 women, including 600 in the Hamilton region, gained valuable training education and personalized supports, empowering them to overcome barriers and pursue economic independence. Across the country, 172 women graduated from our Power Up program and Explore and Ready program. In Hamilton, we had 42 of these graduates are now equipped to apply their new entrepreneurship skills to strengthen and scale out their small businesses, fostering economic advancement and empowerment. In 2024, this year alone, 60 women seeking to grow their businesses reached out to our program business advisor called Business On Call, receiving guidance on strategy and growth. Additionally, our twin program, e-Business Advisors, supported 50 women with essential digital skills, from social media to website development, payment systems, and plug-in integration, which are deemed critical for the modern business success. Finally, I would like to reiterate, by investing in more women, we not only promote gender equity, but we also stimulate long-term sustainable economic growth. The return on this investment is clear: a stronger economy, more resilient communities, and a brighter future for all. For more information on the initiatives that support women's economic growth, we encourage you to reach out to YWCA Hamilton. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you all very much. On to Ms. Gray, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. My first questions are for Rosalind Lockyer. And first of all, I want to say that when I was looking up the profile of your organization, I see that you're affiliated with WeBC, which was formerly called the Women's Enterprise Center, which I was very familiar with because that was an organization that I had received an original loan from to start my business back in 2003, and then years later was asked to be an entrepreneur for women starting business. So, and I see that you have a lot of the same services that they do in British Columbia. So thank you for the good work that you do.
We share an employee.
Oh, wow,
Yes.
Interesting. We'll have to have a side conversation on that. I look forward to talking to you. So what I want to ask you today is, I saw that you had written an opinion piece in the Toronto Star recently entitled, Canada has ever more women entrepreneurs. Why are they still struggling? And you named accessing funding for businesses as one of the biggest obstacles for women entrepreneurs. And I've heard from a lot of women in business that the Liberal proposed capital gains tax hike will hurt their ability to access capital in Canada from investors. And have you heard the same?
Yes, I have. Yes. Access to funding has been one of the biggest stumbling blocks in Canada. And with the WEOC, which I'm on the board of WEOC, we fought for about 10 years or more for the Women's National Loan Fund. And, we're trying to put out money in a more accessible way for women entrepreneurs, but it is a big struggle making, strides. There still has to be criteria for lending and so on. But, the government has done much. This government has done much. And increasing numbers of women are coming to WEOC for funding, for loans, and they're now coming for top-ups. So we're really encouraged by that.
Great, thank
you.
So,
that work, those partnerships are really crucial. The partnerships with other organizations are really crucial.
Thank you so much. So the Perro Centre for Women's Enterprise completed a survey of women entrepreneurs, which showed that 86% of them said financial factors cause them significant stress. And with the entrepreneurs that you work with, do you believe cost increases for their business and tax increases like the carbon tax and the still high interest rates are impacting women-owned businesses with their operating costs and their ability to sustain and grow?
Since COVID, actually, that's increased. I think it was always the case, but since COVID, the costs have gone up. I think it's pretty well global, but the entrepreneurs are really struggling now, and we give whatever support we can so that they can move ahead. If we can increase the amount of funding and training and supports we give them, they are going to grow. I mean, they're very fierce and passionate about growing their business, and you heard Heidi today, and it's giving them the right kind of support in a timely manner when they need it.
Great, thank you. We know through other industry organizations' reports that small businesses have taken on extra debt, and a very high percentage of them have not seen pre-pandemic sales return. So have entrepreneurs that you've worked with also been taking on what could be unsustainable levels of debt, which is becoming tougher to pay back? And is this causing them significant stress?
I think different kinds of debt, may be causing increased stress. What we're trying to do with WEOC is provide them with funding, but also wraparound services so that we're building the business at the same time and not giving them too much funding. More nothing that's going to impact them to have to close down their business or whatever. We're very conscious of that, and that's really important.
Great. Thank you so much. My next questions are for Adriana Vega. And so the Venture Capital and Private Equity Association co-signed a letter with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to the Finance Minister in May, saying that the Liberals' proposed capital gains tax increase, quote, sows division at a time when we need a Team Canada approach to economic growth, unquote. Do you have a dollar figure on how much the Liberal capital gains tax hike may hurt the Canadian economy?
I unfortunately don't have a figure with me today. I can probably find one for you and follow up. What I will say, though, is our organization has been very vocal on the issue of capital gains. The staff and the minister, they have engaged on this issue. At the end of the day, investment and specifically private capital, in our case, venture capital, private equity, this is a risky business, right? In French, venture capital is capital risque, so it's in the name itself. And the whole thing works on the basis of risk reward, right? You're taking high risks, investing in Canadian innovators. Some of these companies are not revenue generating, let alone profitable. So the reward has to be right, and I do think that this is, it's impacting the current investment climate, but down the line.
I've got about 15 seconds here, so I'll just ask quickly, will Canada be less competitive for talent investment or capital in the global market because of the Liberal capital gains tax hike?
Certainly. I mean, the short answer is yes.
Thank you.
Fortier, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of you for being here today. I very much appreciate your participation in this study that I think is very important, that will help us see how we can better support women and support them in participating in international trade. We've spoken a lot about challenges. We know that women in entrepreneurship in Canada face many challenges related to foreign markets, but also related to limited access to funding. So we have existing programs, but we need to do more. So what I'd like to get into with you today as witnesses is, what are we doing right now that is working? You have all more or less shared what's working so far, but what could we also do better? What could we add? What more could we offer to help women entrepreneurs to perform even better? So I'll begin with Ms. Vega. I'm sure that you have some suggestions with venture capital.
I consulted around our membership and with peers in the industry around, what else can the government do? And overwhelmingly what I heard is stay the course. We have a lot of programs that are succeeding in our industry. And when you think about this industry, we're really about a decade old. After the financial crisis, there was virtually very, very little capital in venture, in the venture space. So there's only so much you can do in a decade. Nonetheless, if you look at some of the funds that are specialized in investing in women-led companies, some of them are about 5 years old. So we're really looking at, they're only just at the beginning, right? These are emerging funds. They have one fundraise under their belts, and hopefully they will start seeing the results of those investments to create a track record for themselves and go back to their investors and say, this is why investing in women-led companies is a good investment for you on a return basis, right? Purely market-led. If you look at the programs that BDC has implemented, for example, the Fund for Women in Tech, again, it's only 2017, I believe, that it's been around. So I think that the best thing that the government can do is stay the course, continue to send that signal, because that's how our market works, right? Is you need to send a powerful signal that you have an interest in investing in this. So I would just say congratulations, of course, for what's been done, and keep it up.
Merci. Madame Reimer-Epp.
Thank you, Ms. Reimer-Epp. You have 27 years of experience, so that is some significant experience on the ground. You've worked in international trade, as you mentioned earlier. Do you have any suggestions to make pertaining to women like yourself and others, how we can better support them in international trade?
Yes, thank you so much. I believe that looking at government red tape and some of the regulatory restrictions, as I had referenced in my opening statement, that these are key because we have some really excellent programs that we're able to access as women entrepreneurs. But when it comes to a halt because of our inability to navigate the regulatory requirements or to navigate the red tape aspect of international trade, that it is a real shame because many dollars have been spent and much effort has been given to get to that point. And so this is a big ask, I recognize, because it's a big government. But in my experience that we've been able to access the program successfully, and the hiccup has been then when we need to work the regulatory requirements.
Great, thanks. And actually, I do appreciate, I was privileged to be president of the Treasury Board, and we looked at the red tape. There is still a lot we can do, and the regulatory group that looks into this, I know, had proposed with the S6 projet de loi S6 pour la modernisation. There were
S6?
And it's still in the House of Commons. So hopefully we can pass S6 to help reduce the red tape that exists. Maybe to give a chance to Rosaline Lockyer, if you had something else to add before my time's up, because I know it's almost up. If you can unmute yourself, we'll hear you better.
I seem to be bad at unmuting today. I'll speak quickly on it. We need more money for repeat. We a lot of work and give funding and support to women who are on their first trade mission, but very quickly their businesses become very robust. But cash flow is always a struggle for growing businesses. If we could have more funding to support repeat, and I don't only mean from PARO, we have our Biz Growth program, but that as well, but also we need more money for can export. It's oversubscribed and it doesn't have enough money for underserved women entrepreneurs. So that one is
Madam Chair.
sorry.
The interpreters have stated that the sound is cutting out, which is making their job rather difficult.
Sorry. To end that, I would also say the women's entrepreneurship strategy is significant and vital so that the programs across Canada can move forward. A lot of the funding was like 2 or 3 years, mostly 2, and not even 2. So you can't build on that kind of funding. So I hope that at the end of March that will also continue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Savard-Tremblay, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci à l'ensemble
Thank
des
you, Madam
témoins.
Chair. Thank you to all of our witnesses for your opening statements and your perspectives that you've shared with us today. At our last meeting, witnesses told us that women entrepreneurs have greater difficulty in accessing funding and that they sometimes struggle with pitching, with their sales pitch. Do you agree with this? I was surprised by this statement because we've seen a lot of very bold women, many times a lot more bold than their male counterparts. So do you think that this is the case? If there is a lack of confidence, what could be the cause behind this?
Qui veut répondre?
To whoever would like to answer.
I would like to answer that question, and thank you for the question as a whole. I definitely believe that women are having a difficult time pitching, but I think what is most important is that women are having quite a lot of stress in regards to the funding pieces. So with this, within our program of Power Up Live and Power Up Explore, we've actually trained women to have a better confidence level to perform and be able to address their business plans as a whole. But I think what the big issue is within women in entrepreneurship is that there is a lack of ongoing funding for the programming that has produced, the strengths of skill building for programs like this. So I just wanted to emphasize that, yes, we can grow within our speech of, once again, showcasing our business plans, but I think that the programming and the entirety of continuing within the programs that we already have in Canada as a whole is the most vital piece. Thank you.
May I add to that? Yeah, so I would like to add to that because we do see research that's showing that there's different perceptions by funders or investors when they are assessing the qualities of business opportunities pitched by women and men. And there's research actually shows that even when they were giving the same pitch, women's were generally evaluated lower. And then also during the processes, they were asked different types of questions. So women usually received questions like, how do you manage this? How do you mitigate this risk? How do you manage this downfall? Versus when men pitching, they are more likely to get questions like, what is the business growth opportunity? What's your growth strategies? And research showed that when these different types of questions were being asked, it leads to different outcomes and different, and actually more promotional questions are associated with higher dollar amounts being invested. So I think there is also this systemic barriers and stereotypes and implicit biases that exist that perceive women entrepreneurs as less confident. A lot of the time, as we often say at GATE, fix the system, not the women.
I don't know if you have time for me to respond.
Just hold on, Ms. Lockyer.
Should I just
Ms.
jump
Vegas wants to respond as well to that question.
Thank you. I do want to address the issue of biases because that is true, right? And a lot of the comments that I was hearing from my colleagues on the call were resonating with me because we hear this as well, right? It's like the women entrepreneurs, founders, they go, they prepare, they do the work, they have a profitable business, and then they go and then they meet with investors, and everybody at the cap table are men. They're not represented. And so that really, it just perpetuates the cycle of biases in the investment decisions. And so when you look at some of the efforts that we're doing as an association, it's to precisely tilt the balance at the decision-making table so that women are not just represented and are not just at the table, but that they have power in making decisions and having that investment allocation and understanding, kind of the struggles of women entrepreneurs, meeting women where they are. And so that's why some of our efforts actually seek to reduce those biases in the investment decisions, because it is an issue. And I think you will hear it from the investor community as much as the entrepreneurs in saying access to capital and making that pitch is a challenge for sure.
Écoutez, je pense qu'il y avait Madame aussi qui voulait ajouter quelque chose.
I think that there was another witness that wanted to add something, but that being said, we should have more time later. But Ms. Vegas, what you said was very interesting, stating that investors are usually men. Why is that the case? Is capital concentrated amongst the hands of men, would you say?
I think our industry is not exempt from dynamics that impact other verticals in the financial system. I think that there are biases, and overall, I think it's just the path to entry into our industry is not really clear, right? As I said, our industry is not very long. It's just a decade old, so a lot of these things are kind of we're innovating as we go along. But there is an awareness that this is a problem, and funds themselves will tell you, we want to increase the representation of women and other underserved communities at the cap table. So I don't have an answer really as to why this is, but I would say that it is a problem that persists across the industries.
Il y avait Madame qui voulait ajouter quelque chose. Là, qui avait une...
I think there was another witness that wanted to add something.
You have no time left.
It was me.
Pourquoi?
So sorry.
Okay.
You managed to get a lot of information though on your time. Mr. Cannings, please, for 6 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being with us today. I'm going to start with Ms. Campbell. In your opening remarks, this is the International Trade Committee, and you mentioned trade agreements that Canada has, and certainly in the modern trade agreements, the more recent ones, there are chapters on women's place in the economy, promoting gender equality. I'm just wondering, I didn't really catch your thoughts on that. I'm just wondering if I could give you a bit of time to expand on that, and what, I guess 2 questions. What has been the effect of those chapters? Have they done anything to promote women's participation in international trade? And if not, or what would you like to see in chapters such as that would have an effect, would have a positive impact?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's clear to me that Canada is and has been a global leader in terms of gender inclusive free trade agreements. We have a fairly pro-feminist trade and development strategy. And I think really the big push for that initially came from South American countries that pushed things forward with gender mainstreaming, and Canada really did pick that up and follow suit. I think it helps that there are some Canadian women in top leadership roles. We've got Minister Freeland, Minister Jolie, Minister Ning in key positions to help move that forward. And I do see that, financing women's small and medium-sized enterprises, focusing on, on agriculture and other sectors, has been helped by the addition of gender chapters and provisions in free trade agreements. I think it's great to see, but it doesn't also fix all of the issues that we have with women gaining access to international markets. So it's a good piece, and at the Canadian Women's Foundation, we certainly encourage that effort. But all of the other pieces around supporting the women's entrepreneurship strategy and supporting the investment readiness program and all of these other initiatives that have been happening, they need to also continue so that we can support domestically the businesses that would take advantage of those provisions.
So would there be specific ways you'd want to strengthen those chapters to provide that framework for both countries or both parties in these agreements to make sure that women have that support?
I have to admit that I am not an international trade expert, and so I couldn't really provide detailed sort of recommendations around how those chapters specifically could be strengthened. But I can say that the mere presence of them is encouraging and something that we'd like to see.
Okay, I'll turn to Ms. Liu. I mean, you mentioned, I think right off the top in your remarks that women's enterprise is often different, smaller self-employment is common, and those kind of businesses are often overlooked in some of the investment opportunities. I'm just wondering if you could expand on that and how we should be looking at smaller, often self-employed companies that need support and aren't getting it now. What should we be doing differently?
Thank you very much for the questions. So we definitely have seed research around how women's entrepreneurships differ from those that are led or founded by men. And one distinction very clearly is that they are more concentrated in the small enterprise, like with less than 10 employees. And often there's also a lot of self-employment. And by definition, I think a lot of the entrepreneurship programs or research doesn't really look into this group of entrepreneurs, but they are overrepresented by women. Another research that we also see are women also pursue growth very differently because of all the other circumstances, like they shoulder a lot of the unpaid labor at home and also even within the business, often assume a lot more of the administrative type of roles that are undervalued. So I think better policies, I don't have like a kind of the silver bullet to solve this problem or any recommendations specific, but I think when we talk about having policies or programs to support women entrepreneurships, even assessing international markets, I think we need to look into this special segment of entrepreneurships and tailor more targeted programs to support them. Speaking from my own personal experience, I once was a self-employed consultant and have international clients, and I've never even considered any kind of trade policies that actually could apply to me or any program support that could apply to me. But now looking at it, I think I am exporting my service. So I think that's Canada will benefit from expanding these definitions and looking into this group of entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much. Mr. Martel, please, for 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci d'être avec.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here with us today. Ms. Vega. Canada has increased investment in supporting women entrepreneurs. There are countries, though, such as the UK, that have better results in terms of women entrepreneurs and more funding. Do you think that we are not using this funding properly in Canada?
I'm not sure that I can comment on the results in other countries. I'm not familiar with the statistics on the countries that you were mentioning. But as I was hearing my colleagues talk about, this sort of like booming number of women in tech, women entrepreneurs, that we hear the same, right? And this is a very positive trend. We want to see more of that. But I think part of the challenge, at least in our industry, when you have fund managers that are fundraising and then allocating this capital into businesses, including women-led businesses, a lot of them they're all competing with each other for the same pools of capital that are available in this country, right? So when you're a GP or a general partner managing a fund in venture, you go to different pools of capital to source that and raise your fund, right? So you go to the corporations, institutional investors, you go to individuals, angel networks, et cetera. But as long as that pool of capital doesn't grow, it's going to be very difficult to funnel that ultimately into the funds and eventually into the entrepreneurs. So I do think that perhaps a better way to look at it is just look at the whole chain of capital formation and how best we can channel that.
Oui, mais Madame Vega, le Canada a des fonds
Ms. Vega, Canada has funding available to support women entrepreneurs, but it seems that it's not being utilized properly to create things such as incubators, mentorship programs for women. However, in the US and in the UK, we can see that things are going better. I know it's difficult to compare, but my question is, how could we better use existing resources to strengthen the entrepreneurship ecosystem for women?
I think that part of it is time, allowing these results to start delivering, because at the end of the day, the general partners that are fundraising and allocating, they have to deliver results to their investors, right? So eventually when you exit a business, ultimately this is an asset business. And so they have to demonstrate that their thesis is correct and that these businesses are succeeding. Comparing to the UK, I'm not quite sure, how we benchmark. I don't have the stats in front of me. But just to give you a sense of the gaps between the Canadian market and the American market, at the height of capital allocation of 2021, Canada had about $16 billion deployed into the asset class. By comparison, in the US, you had $300 billion. And so, of course, that just right there gives you a sense of kind of the gaps that exist in capital allocation. So when I talk about perhaps the priority is to grow those pools of capital, I think that goes to the core of that argument, right? Because the biases that exist, overall, whether it is the US, Canada, we're no strangers to that, and we see those same biases. We're looking to address them. But I think that perhaps there's also an element of just waiting for the sector to mature.
Oui. Regardez, Madame Vega, aux États-Unis.
Ms. Vega, in the U.S., women created many new companies after the pandemic. In Canada, we're more so talking about support for this recovery. So I'd like to hear your opinion. We don't see the same momentum for female entrepreneurship in Canada. Would you say that what the government is doing is not as effective as one may think?
I think to a certain degree I would disagree with that. I do think that our statistics of, startups, creation are really picking up now. So perhaps that cycle has started to bottom out and started to increase, right? I think that there's a lot of programs that the government has implemented that have a good track record of success. But as I said, the cycles in our industry are very, very long. So from the moment that you raise a fund, for you to deploy and return that capital, it takes a decade, right? So I think that the statistics are showing that women entrepreneurs are starting to, really pick that up. We'll see some results in the next few years.
Madame Vega, regardez, parce qu'il me reste pas, regarde, même...
Ms. Vega, I know I don't have much more time, but even with the existing initiatives, access to funding for female entrepreneurs is a major challenge in Canada. Do you think that existing programs do not effectively target the sectors in which women need support? For example, when we compare ourselves to the US or Europe in terms of access to funding?
Be debatable, right? Like, are they going to the right sectors? But at the end of the day, capital allocation has to continue to be market-based, right? You can't, there's only so much intervention that you can have in the market before you start distorting that risk-reward, right? So entities have to continue to behave.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sheehan for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is just so informative, so interesting, and thank you to all our presenters for their testimony and their work on improving women entrepreneurship and women involved in trade as well. We've been talking about enterprise centers, and I had a bit of a flashback. I used to be a general manager of an enterprise center in Northern Ontario and Sault Ste. Marie, which serves Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma. And then I went on to work at Northern Development Mines, which is like FedNor for Ontario, and I looked after all the ones in Northern Ontario. And, you know, what you're saying today, I used to hear back then too as well. And, you know, how is it that we're going to be able to move these yardsticks forward? You know, when I'm listening to Heidi, your testimony was just excellent. You know, a co-founder of a great business, the Botanical Paperworks Inc., that's just not a micro business, it's 50 people plus. So, you know, in reading through your stuff and listening to your testimony, Heidi, how important is mentorship, you know, to you? I know you're involved in mentorship. And how could the federal government improve women mentoring other women, in particular as it relates to trade as well?
Yes, I'm lucky at this stage in my career to be a mentor to others, but I've definitely benefited from mentorship in one form or another over all these years of business. And it was access through that enterprise center at the beginning, because I didn't actually show up there looking for mentorship, but it was something that was almost a requirement in order to look at the financing and the other services I was accessing. And so I thought that is an interesting thing in retrospect, realizing that when we are giving out funds, that if we pair that up with a mentorship requirement, that I think that it boosts the effectiveness of the dollars that are being handed out, because you're also then have the support of someone who has gone before you, who can point out your blind spots or, you know, give you some expertise that you don't have. And so, and later as well, then that, of course, that was a government mentorship program, but I found mentorship through other private groups such as Entrepreneurs Organization and things that I was now paying into as an entrepreneur, which helped me scale the business to $1 million and then beyond. And so I don't have any other recommendations for what the government can do, but I hope that my story helps illuminate or provide some ideas.
Well, thank you very much. That's absolutely critically important. Now, when you're doing your business, how much of your market share is related to trade? Are you delving into that greatly? And could you tell us a little story about that?
Yes. So for us, because we are a niche product, seed paper, you know, it's a pretty specialized area of business. And so exporting was the natural place for us to go in order to have access to a wider market. And this is something that I recommend for people who are producing a niche product to go beyond Canada to get to scale and to get volume. So international trade has been part of it since just the first couple of years that we were in business. That was also partly driven by the fact that at the time Americans were online faster than Canadians were, and of course there's more of them. And so there were very few trade barriers at the time, and so it was quite easy to export our product across the United States. And then as the years went by, we started producing we would do our own planning in order to select one export market and then drop into that and really optimize our sales and our marketing reach to each market one by one, and kept adding more and more.
That's really great, and thank you very much for that. Next question is to Paro from Thunder Bay in Northern Ontario. Congratulations on your success. I always run into people in Northern Ontario, whether it's Sault Ste. Marie or otherwise, that you know, you've helped considerably. And one of the things I want to ask is, you know, how can the regional economic development agencies, such as FedNor, you know, there's a regional economic development agency for every part of this great country, how can they do? Okay, what can they do better? I've seen lots of things that FedNor's done. They've funded individual people to do trade missions for different communities. They've done breakfasts. They've done networking. They've done mentorship programs. But how important are the regional economic development agencies to deliver a regional kind of trade opportunities, and any ideas around that?
Can I have, Ms. Lockyer, I hate to ask this, but can I have a brief answer, please?
I'll try my best. I'm not very brief, sorry, Madam Chair. I think I would suggest that connecting businesses, and that's why I invited government representatives to go on the trade missions with us. FedNor does provide funding for us to bring but there's some doors that is very difficult for us to open, even on a trade mission, without a government representative there. I think that's something that would help in all trade missions, should have someone with the government that has doors open to them that they can now open to the businesses.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Monsieur Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors, cette fois, je précise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this time, I'll make it clear. If any of you want to respond, just raise your hand. So at our last meeting, a witness suggested that we create a tax incentive program to push companies to do business with women-led companies, as is the case in the U.S., and that we could do this through establishing some quotas. This may be difficult to establish, but not impossible. Do you think that this would be a good idea, a good path to follow to support women entrepreneurs? So whoever would like to speak to this may do so.
Ne soyez pas si timide.
Don't be shy.
I'm sure there's at least Ms. Campbell raised her hand.
Okay, I'll take a try on this one. Sure. I think tax incentives, that's a great idea. I think that anything that can be done to support women led businesses led by gender diverse people, particularly those from equity deserving groups, to be able to secure government contracts and to be looking at procurement policies. I think that would be very, very beneficial. And supporting some kind of program that can support those businesses to be ready to bid on those types of contracts. So when we think about the work that we were able to do with the Investment Readiness Program funding through ESDC, we were supporting women and gender diverse entrepreneurs to be able to be ready to secure investments through the Social Finance Fund. Something similar around procurement would be quite strong, I think. So that's sort of a sideways way of answering your question. It's not exactly about tax incentives, but I think that's also a way forward.
Combien de temps?
28.
How much time left?
Voudrais ajouter quelque chose?
Would anyone else like to add something? Because I don't really have the time to jump into a whole new question.
Ms. Reimer-Epp, if you want to a brief answer to that.
In brief, to say that any of our customers that have procurement requirements that have them allocating a certain percentage to women-owned and diversity-owned businesses, that we have benefited from those types of programs. That has been to our advantage.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cannings for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you. I'm going to turn to Ms. Hamadou, continuing with this kind of theme of if women in general are working in smaller companies, self-employed, different times of scaling up, etc. You mentioned cooperatives and collectives as models of enterprises that women perhaps more often use. I just met with a group that represent cooperatives in Canada, and they brought up some of the issues that they have, because that's a model of business that I guess is uncommon enough in Canada that doesn't fit into a lot of the government's attempts at promoting enterprise and business because of how they're funded. Do you have any comments on that about how we could support cooperatives and collectives in this country?
Yes, absolutely, and thank you for the question. And when we're looking at cooperatives and collectives led by women, it has become a very important model of business that prioritizes social and economic and gender equity as a whole, and the operative and democratic principles that are growing as a whole in the structures and fosters the economic empowerment, community resilience, and overall solidarity amongst women. And I think that when we are looking at the continuation of growing these, when we look at the programs that are already been created and we look at the business models that have already been created as a whole, I think when we go back to the larger issue of the lack of funding between programs and the continuation of these programs that grow these collectives and cooperations is key. So I think when we're looking at the whole of these models and the fact that we need to support women in these models is something that we definitely should be looking into further. But once again, I always strongly go back to, and this is based off of the programming that we've created at the YWCA, is the growth of women in entrepreneurship. And within these models, no matter what the collectives or the cooperatives are, it's the key investment by our government to continue this programs. And from not just from a year standpoint, but from a collective, we've seen that the data has increased and we know that the investment is there. But what does that look like from a longer standpoint? So when we're looking at these models and the economic growth of women, it's really about what this investment will look like from a longevity standpoint.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Williams for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Vega, you gave some stats at the beginning talking about the challenge of female-founded companies in getting venture capital funding. We know the big gaps that exist between Canada and the U.S. They're pretty stark. I think in 2023, Canada raised $6 billion in venture capital funding, but the U.S. raised $200 billion. What are we seeing in differences on that stat you gave on in Canada? I think you said it was 4%. Was that correct? Of at least one female founder. Is that correct? Yes, in Canada that invested. What are the numbers in the U.S.? Do you?
I think the last statistic that I have is global, and it's 2%. It was 2%. So Canada was relatively okay, I would say, probably lower than the U.S., I would venture a guess. But the positive development is that this year, that figure has gone up to 12%. So, it tells you something about these trends having an impact, having investors sitting at the table, right, and making those decisions and eliminating those biases. So I do think these numbers are going to ebb and flow, but seeing that 12%, just half of 2024, is very encouraging.
It's good, and I think the numbers I've seen from the U.S. is about $33 billion. So I think 21% is the number I've seen for female-funded VCs. A lot of reasons for that is they have some different programs that are built by venture capitalists themselves that do invest into those startups, and not only the first round but second or third rounds, which is really important. What are specific steps we can do in Canada to first get more venture capital as a whole, but to do that and keep increasing those numbers?
How long do I have? I think this is capital it's a good way to think about it is a supply chain, right? And it takes time for it to go from a fundraise. You go to your LPs, your limited partners, which are your investor base. You pitch them a concept, right? Your hypothesis for your fund, and your hypothesis can be, pre-seed companies, or it can be women-led companies, LGBTQ plus companies. And then once you establish that thesis, you allocate that fund, and then you reap the rewards, right? Like you start exiting those investments. But that whole process in Canada can take up to 15 years. So it takes a very long time for you to establish that track record. Now, we have four funds in Canada that are solely focused on women-founded enterprises. Those are all emerging funds. So they're all only at their first or second fundraise. So it's going to take time for us to see the results and for them to establish that hypothesis and say, hello, like institutional investor, this is why it makes sense for you on a market base for you to come and invest in this asset class, and particularly in this cohort of enterprises. So I think if we reconvene in 4 years' time, 10 years' time, I do think that those metrics will look very different. But again, just taking a step back and looking at the history of our sector, it's really just a decade old. So we're making progress. Is it fast enough? Probably not. We would all see it. Would like to see this happen faster, but it is happening. So
one troubling stat we've seen is that there's still $6 billion only in venture capital, and a lot more in the U.S. So a lot of Canadian firms are finding that American firms are investing in them, that they are the VCs investing. Can you comment on where we're seeing American VCs invest in Canadian companies, and is anything happening where we're seeing those Canadian companies, if they've gotten a certain percentage, leave Canada?
I think your companies start getting flight risk flashing lights at around the third fundraise. But American capital is very dominant in Canada. I think some statistics in certain rounds, you can see up to 75 cents but for every dollar that is invested here is American capital. So it's very dominant. Obviously, we're sitting right next to the biggest market on earth in terms of dollar availability, and also very competitive environment within the U.S. itself, right? You have multiple jurisdictions, deploying capitals, many different taxation regimes. And so I feel like it's kind of a blessing and a curse. In a sense, we have access to a lot of this capital, but it also puts us at a very tricky situation in that a lot of these companies are going to be incentivized to leave. And
sorry, I just have 20 seconds. The Canadian entrepreneurs and businesses having to rely on U.S. investors at risk also losing their Canadian-controlled private corporation status. What are the consequences of losing that status?
Well, I think the consequences are that they lose out on access to certain programs in Canada, but I think overall the economy loses out, right? Because we're losing IP, we're losing talent, we're losing the ability to grow these companies domestically into multinational. So Canada should be looking at our competitiveness from a tax lens for sure. And I would be remiss not to mention capital gains is, of course, the wrong way to go about it. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Aria for 5 minutes.
I'm glad to see Canadian Venture Capital and Private Equity Association is part of this very important study. Before joining politics 3 years, I was a member of CVCA when I was working for a defense technology company. At the same time, I was also on the board of Invest Ottawa, the organization that has been promoting technology companies in Canada, in Ottawa, the technology sector. I was just going through Invest Ottawa team today. I'm so glad to find that about 70% of the current team of Invest Ottawa are women, and led by Sonia Shourie as the president and CEO. That is a great leap forward. And even on the board of Invest Ottawa, close to 50% are women. But we have to see the same thing amongst the entrepreneurs too. And I'm glad to know that CVCA is your three pillars of education and the diverse talent pipeline. And the third one, if I'm not wrong, it was research on DEI. That is very important because I was the member of industry committee here in 2016, 2017. During part of our study, when I looked at the women participation in the top management of corporate sector in Canada, the then statistics said that 36% are women, which is a good thing. We should grow to more than 50%. But when we drill down, that among that 36%, only 1% were women of visible minority. So I'm glad that when we say women entrepreneurship, inclusive, it has to be inclusive amongst the indigenous women, women with disability, visible minority women, etc. Madam Chair, while talking about, when I was listening to various witnesses today, I heard two things. One is that we need more funding. That is always constant thing I keep hearing. Whenever any witnesses come, any industry group come, etc., they need more funding from the federal government. Instead of that, what if I suggest? A couple of witnesses mentioned about IRAP program, which is a very good one for the emerging technologies, and STRED program, again, where the Women Entrepreneurship Fund funds women entrepreneurs across the sector, whether it's setting up a restaurant to technology companies. I would like to ask Ms. Vega whether to focus to promote women entrepreneurs in the emerging sectors, in the advanced technologies, in the new technology sector, is it better if we carve out a portion of the existing funding programs like IRAP, STRED, etc., wherein we can carve out a portion of it for women entrepreneurs or give women entrepreneurs slightly extra incentive compared to the male entrepreneurs? Is it a good thing instead of setting up another fund to support women entrepreneurs in technology sector?
I mean, it's kind of related to your earlier question, right? It's like, is it an incentive that you need to kind of carve out specifically for women entrepreneurs? I think there's value in those, just as there is in tax incentives. At the end of the day, it's different policy tools that achieve different things. I think ultimately, big picture things, like we do think a couple of things. One thing, we should perhaps be a little bit more ambitious because government can do a lot of things. They can, de-risk, they can incentivize, they can attract private sector capital. But government alone can't do it all, right? Absolutely. So I think that's one thought. The second thought is market dynamics are so important, right? Even for an entrepreneur, once you get funding from private entities, that just serves as a bit of a presentation card, right, down the line and saying, I have, achieved this level of success in fundraising from all these different sources of capital, including government, but also elsewhere. And so I think that as we design policy, it has to be cohesive, right?
Yeah. Because sure. I want to ask the same questions to Ms. Heidi Remper-Epp. You did... You have 30 seconds. Okay, I will just ask the question. Maybe she can answer later. You mentioned about the regulatory inefficiencies and about the government agencies should modernize. That applies to all entrepreneurs. Is there anything specific that you'd like us to do that helps women's entrepreneurs in particular?
Am I allowed to answer that at this point? Yeah. I think that I'm encouraged by the work that the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters is doing to look at red tape and look at barriers to trade. And so what could be done would be to partner with an association like CME to take their insights into what are the impediments and then to work systematically at clearing them.
Mr. Baldinelli, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for being with us today. Thank you all for your presentations and your comments. I'm going to follow up with Ms. Reimer-Epp first and your comments and during your presentation, your 3 recommendations. And the third one talked about the regulatory inefficiencies that you find that are in place that are hindering the export opportunities and business growth potential. I was just wondering if you could expand on that more in terms of what you're facing and your company is facing. You had mentioned phytosanitary provisions and regulatory rules in place, which kind of preclude you, because of the timelines, from capitalizing on sales and access into markets. Can you just explain and expand on that a little bit more?
Yes, thank you for the question. It is a challenge because the speed of business these days is very fast, and it's particularly when you are specializing in e-commerce, which is what we are doing. We're selling consumer goods and goods within the promotional product industry and packaging and memorial products and a wide range of paper products. And so on the one end, we have our customers who are expecting Amazon-like experiences, same day, next day, 2-day delivery. And then you have us, which is a CME, working to fulfill within the same level of expectations. And so when we've got a government agency that we're partnering with to get the phytosanitary certificates in order to satisfy the international seed exporting and importing requirements, and sort of a lack of speedy technology that would allow the rapid delivery of that is what has slowed us down. And so it feels like, of course, from my perspective, quite simple. We just need a portal where we can request the certificate and get it same day, and then we would be off and running. I appreciate that it's more difficult than that, but at the same time, we're being asked as a company to digitize and embrace this technology, and would like to see the same in our government partners.
Thank you for that. If I could, I'm going to go to Ms. Lockyer. And just earlier, my one colleague had mentioned the opinion piece that you had shared on March 23rd. And in it, you talk about women business owners have created more than 1.5 million jobs and contributed about $150 billion to the Canadian economy. And that was according to research by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Yet, despite this, a recent survey of women entrepreneurs by the nonprofit Paro Center found that they are facing challenges that negatively affect their mental health and wellness. Can you just expand on that just a little bit more?
Yes, I can. I think it's at the time that I wrote that, we were transitioning out of the pandemic, and women had additional pressures on them because of their situations at home, between looking after the children and trying to teach them on the screen instead of in school, and then the elders' problems and so on. Then on top of that, they, lost business because they couldn't pivot fast enough to the online economy that if they were doing retail and service businesses, which women do more of, and therefore that added increased pressure. All of that kind of stress and pressure does impact your mental health. Because of that, we've added things to our program, and other people have as well, other women's organizations that recognizes that kind of stress and how it affects mental and physical health and the long-term disadvantages of to everyone, between the family and the community and our economy, if women are impacted that way. So we do need to recognize that is a fact and need to keep working and supporting women so they can carry on the very important role that they play in our lives.
Well, thank you. Madam Chair, 30 seconds. I was just following up. There's another survey, the recent survey from CFIB. 67% of the members recently identified tax and regulatory costs as a major cost constraint on their business. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. And the taxation is changing all the time. I know that in, various countries, it is quite different than it is in Canada. Canada does need to have more tax incentives, I think, for business to start up and during their business. Otherwise, they're not going to take the risk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fortier, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all again. What you're sharing is very interesting, and I think it gives us a better perspective on how we can continue to support women entrepreneurs in international trade. I was looking at the Library of Parliament notes. They often suggest questions for us, and there was one of them that I found very interesting. And I think some of you might have a great answer to this. So we've found that a company's inability to get the credit that it requires tends to reduce the amount of exports that it's doing. In 2020, there was a report by the UN that found that women often find themselves in less favorable conditions because they're victim of financial discrimination throughout the entire world. In 2019, it was found that women are more likely to be victim to violence and harassment, especially at the border, which limits their ability to participate in international investments because this harassment happens often abroad. So do women looking to export have a hard time accessing funding? And if the answer is yes, where is this difficulty stemming from? And do you think that female entrepreneurs are facing greater challenges in this field and receiving less funding than their male counterparts? So if anyone would like to share an answer to this.
I can give it a shot. So I think we are definitely seeing research that's showing the funding gap in received by women entrepreneurs compared to their male counterparts. I think the problems are multi-pronged. One of the things that I think is mentioned earlier by other witnesses, but there's the gender pay gap that exists in Canada and globally. The gender pay gaps also leads to the gender investment gaps and gender saving gap. So it's all connected. So all this like intergenerational and also kind of historical gaps and disadvantage has impacted women's ability to access finance, both from in terms of debt financing, but also equity financing. So I think that's when we look at measures to close these gaps, we can't just look into the current snapshots. The current moments are only one part of it. We have to take a more holistic approach and look at all these other factors that are contributing to why women are not having access to debt. And one of them is lacking the collateral. And that is also rooted in a lot of historical problems, especially for Indigenous women, or maybe immigrants women at their credit scores in Canada. So I think hopefully that will answer your questions. But from a research point of view, we also need more research and better data in order to understand better.
Oui. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un d'autre qui veut répondre avec la question?
Is there anyone else who would like to answer the question?
I think that we have to look at it systemically. There's this historical, there's cultural, and there's systemic barriers. So women have a perception when they go to ask for funds that they're not going to get it, rather than I'm going to get it, right? So that it deters them as well. And I think until all of these challenges are improved, it's going to be the same. And there's a lot of unconscious bias that people don't think they're biased at all against women, when it really is there, because that's what they've heard. Right? They've heard that women have lack confidence. They've heard that women have lack of funding. So the women hear this and others hear it. And it is still having a negative effect on how women are faring in growing their business and in exporting. And so we have a lot of work to do. And, 2 years of funding with, and it doesn't start till 6 months in those 2 years, is just not going to crack it. We need to tackle these big problems. These, we know the big problems. We need to have a long-term plan on how to address them.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this my last round?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a motion that I would like to table now. I'm sure we won't have to suspend. We can continue the meeting after this, but I'd like to be transparent, and so I'd like to read it in public. It will be sent to you in both official languages very soon, but I would like us to deal with this at the next meeting. So this is on forced labor. So given that in its budget presented in March 2023, the government had announced its intention to introduce legislation by 2024 to eliminate forced labor from Canadian supply chains and to strengthen the ban on the importation of goods produced by forced labor. Page 195 of the French version and page 171 of the English version. In its budget presented in March 2024, the government had announced that it would accomplish such a measure during the year 2024. Page 369 of the French version and page 320 of the English version. To date, the government has still not acted and no bill has been tabled. Following a unanimous motion adopted on November 28, 2023, the committee had sent a letter to the government reminding it of its commitment and requesting a response to the committee's attention and explaining the reasons for this inaction, but that despite this, nothing had yet been done by the government. That the committee report back to the House to express that recourse to these practices, which undermine the fundamental rights of workers, vulnerable people, and children, is totally inadmissible, and that if it finds the government's inaction deplorable and unacceptable. Do I still have time to get back to business now?
Didn't take your time to read that out. I left the motion.
Oh, ben,
Well,
mon
it
Dieu,
just
vous êtes
makes
d'une
sense.
générosité, Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, it is very generous of you.
So are all of the members, so you have 2.2 seconds, 20 seconds left.
20 secondes.
20 seconds?
OK, c'est ça.
2 minutes, 20 seconds. Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So March 24th, 2024, the Women's Network of Quebec announced, and this is a question for anyone, announced that they were creating the Maya inclusive program that would be for the entire country. The goal was to offer information, networking, and advice to women entrepreneurs who want to access new markets. We spoke to them on Tuesday, and they considered that Quebec was actually ahead of other provinces and was an example for the rest of Canada. And this is thanks to our institutions, and we tend to intervene more with dépôts de placement, for example. So are there initiatives and programs that would be beneficial to apply to other provinces outside of Quebec? And are there any interesting initiatives in other provinces that should be better known by the rest of Canada?
I would love to answer this question just in regards to some of the other initiatives that are happening in Ontario specifically. And one of them is through our YWCA programming. And once again, networking and networking is a key way for women entrepreneurs to once again connect and talk about the barriers that they're facing, but also some of the positive faces that they're currently dealing with as they grow and scale out their businesses. And one of those pieces is a weekly and a bi-weekly conversation that we have called Power Up Live, which is a different subjects that we have every 2 weeks to talk about different financial struggles or different entrepreneurship growth opportunities. And we have over 80 people signing up for those on a bi-weekly basis for our programming. And I think that's something that needs to be scaled out in different communities. And we have started to work on scaling those out into, Vancouver or Saskatoon, Manitoba, Calgary. So it's an ongoing initiative that we're doing in regards to networking. But I think the one big piece within this networking opportunity is to talk about different ideas and talk about different topics that women are currently facing within their entrepreneurship journey. And one of the big pieces is financial literacy. And as we continue to have those conversations, we always need to talk about what are current facing issues that women are dealing with. And as we continuously have these conversations, we learn more from women and their entrepreneurship journey.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cannings, please.
Thank you. And I'm going to continue with Ms. Hamadou. In your opening remarks, you also mentioned the importance of government procurement, and we've heard this from other witnesses, that government procurement, and this affects all enterprises that are starting up and in that kind of valley of death where you're moving from research and development to a commercial product, where you need to get the confidence of clients, of buyers, but also you need the cash flow to continue. And government procurement could provide both that. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on situations that you might have encountered with enterprises that women have been moving forward that could have used that government procurement.
Absolutely. We have had over 100 different entrepreneurship opportunities within the women that have participated in our program in regards to government procurement and not being able to get the sustainable funding to upscale and scale out their programming. We've had countless in the healthcare. We've had countless in tech and STEM that need the ongoing support and government assistance to scale out their programming. We've recently come into contact with our Innovation Factory and our Center of Innovation programming to once again scale out these programs and provide different materials for women to grow their businesses on a tech, STEM, and skilled trade system, industry base. So once again, when we're looking at government procurement and the initial funding opportunities that need to be once again targeted to women entrepreneurship, we need to really look into the STEM. We need to look into technology. We need to look into skilled trades and the funding that goes into those programs to once again grow out women entrepreneurship businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Genero for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everybody for taking the time today to be with us. I just kind of have one question I want to get to the bottom of, and hoping you might be able to help Ms. Vega. At last committee, we heard from a witness that said it was rather difficult that after looking for venture capital and getting it through the United States to then have the ability to have a business eligible for funding and other supports here in Canada. It seems like once they go the United States route, they're gone to the United States route. Is this experience that you've seen, is this accurate? And if so, is there a role that government could or should be playing in helping to keep these Canadian-owned businesses as Canadian-owned businesses?
Yes, it's an issue that we see. I think it's, in a sense, it's almost a natural kind of trend that you see, right? A lot of the market for Canadian enterprises is outside of Canada, right? And most of the companies that will get venture capital have to have a thesis that they have a global plan to succeed, right? Like we're a smaller economy relatively, or small market in terms of customers. And so that is, in a sense, there's a big magnet in the U.S. You have huge pools of talent, huge pools of capital. And so some of the things that we do is we need to tilt the balance when it comes to incentives to retain some of those components within our borders, right? Whether that is talent, that is capital. And then as government, you have many tools that are available to you, right? So we've looked at things like SRED, for example. There is a review ongoing. We're expecting some developments there. But looking at maybe making some of these programs a little bit more targeted, right? Making them specifically available for companies that are at a specific kind of growth phase. You know, if you're at your third fundraise, for example, you're probably a flight risk already. And you probably already have a lot of American dollars in your investment. So targeting some companies that are successful, that are aligned with some of our priority sectors, I think would be clever policy. And then things like incentives, right? I think that people today, we've talked about perhaps doing some tax incentives or redirecting some of these programs in a way that incentivizes those Canadian companies to stay. I do think that they're all valuable, but at the end of the day, tone from the top, right? It's like you have to have like a real strategy that makes Canada a very appealing place to build a business, because I think a lot of these entrepreneurs, they want to stay, you know, but we continue in a sense to make it easier for them to make the decision to leave. And so that's really kind of where the focus of our efforts has to be placed, right? Things like, you know, capital gains taxation. And I know I say that over and over, but it really truly is at the core of the rewards, you know, risk-reward balance in our sector. And you can tweak with some tax incentives, but at the end of the day, that is probably the most strong signal that you can send to the market, and for an entrepreneur or an investor to decide, you know, do I build my company? Do I grow my company here? And those are the kind of questions that we're hearing every day. So, yeah, it really has to be an almost more strategic approach for that.
Are you hearing, I guess, more of that recently? Then I guess particularly when it comes to capital gains, because you indicate that's obviously a hurdle. Is that are Are businesses coming to you, the network that you have, are they discussing this and saying this is something that really is a make or break decision for us?
I think there's many different things that a business will take into account, right? I don't think there's any entrepreneur out there that sets out, early on and saying how much tax am I going to pay in this jurisdiction versus the next. Like they're generally there to solve a problem. They're not even thinking about revenue generating, right? They're at the forefront of innovation, and so that's really kind of what we see as their main driver. But as they start fundraising and they start growing their business, I think that's really when you start taking into consideration that cost equation, right? And the problem is that we're raising the cost of capital, which, it might seem in principle like it shouldn't be a big deal. It is when you're sitting next to the United States, because we have jurisdictions, and I'm not even talking about California, thinking about states like Washington State, Minnesota, Texas, Ohio, like all of these are comparable hubs when it comes to venture capital fundraising. And we're expensive. We're more expensive now than most of them. So yes, we hear those conversations, we hear those questions, and I don't think that there is an immediate, exit button that's being pressed, but it's certainly something that is being considered a lot more closely.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sidhu for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for taking the time to be with us here today. Ms. Lockyer, you had mentioned trade missions and trade delegations and the importance of government reps to be on these trade delegations as it helps to open doors in markets overseas. And that's exactly what we're doing in the Indo-Pacific strategy. We've got the Team Canada trade missions that are being led by Minister Ng to Japan, Malaysia, Vietnam, South Korea, and many other countries. And we found that there's tremendous success that came out of this because we were able to unlock doors and really connect entrepreneurs, whether that's here in Canada, to opportunities abroad. You mentioned the Can Export program. Can you maybe highlight some of the successes you've had with that program? And I know you said it's oversubscribed and you hope more funding is put towards it, but I'd really like to know of the current successes with the Can Export program.
Well, I think we've had a lot of success with the Can Export program because we were funding first-time people, first-time women going on trade missions. We were training them how to do this. But just when they're getting their feet wet and they're all enthusiastic about doing what they're doing, now they want to go again. And they probably need to go about 3 times before they really are making the kind of progress that they want to make. But they're still starting and growing their business. And, you look at the stats, startups are very good at exporting as, they start out with exporting on their mind, so that they're seeding their business and how they operate their business to be exporters. So with that, this is when they need this vital support. We did our funding originally, and still is, coming from the regional agencies. So unlike those funded from ICID and so on. If they were funded from ICID, the government representatives automatically went. We're inviting them to go because they have part of our original planning and programming. But I think it's vital that they go. It could be because we're doing them to the United States rather than to, the Asian market or whatever, or Netherlands or whatever opportunities that might come their way. And maybe we need more exporting there because I think, 60% of our exporting comes from the United States. But because there was easy access, we found that we wanted to start with the United States because women can the culture is similar, and it was an easier learn to be able to become exporting in the United States, especially in the food industry. It's easier to get in the food industry in the United States than it is across Canada, another problem we're trying to tackle.
Got it. And Ms. Vega, you had mentioned there's many successful federal government programs, and I want to hear really quickly from the witnesses if you could just pick one of your favorite programs, which one would it be in terms of the biggest bang for its buck in supporting women entrepreneurship, women in trade? Maybe we can start with Ms. Vega.
Well, I spoke in my remarks about the funding that we got through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, and I think that has very concrete deliverables for us. So, I know that there's a multitude of other programs, at ISED, and we hear good things about it, but at least when it comes to our sector, just having this, impactful funding to take this, and have women join funds and join companies in our sector, I feel like that's really the best we can hope for in our sector, for sure.
Thank you. And perhaps we can hear from Ms. Campbell or Ms. Hamidou.
Happy to intervene on this. The Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy funding that we received for 2 years has been critical. We have 7 community partners that are working with women, gender diverse entrepreneurs from the most underserved communities, providing them with all of that support to explore business, to start up, to scale. And we couldn't have done it without the support of the entrepreneurship strategy. But as Rosalind has mentioned, 2 years is not enough. We have a lot more work to do, and our partners want to continue.
I would also quickly. Great. I would also like to highlight our Uplift program provided by the YWCA and funding by the federal government in regards to the longevity of advanced manufacturing data analytics and the growth of women in STEM and the skilled trades. Once again, as we continue to invest in women and growth in their economic advancement, I think when we're looking at male-dominated fields and having women go into those male-dominated fields, we're going to see substantial growth as a longevity piece within our goal of economic empowerment for women. Thank you.
Well, I have to thank all of our witnesses. I think we got invaluable information from each and every one of you today, so thank you all very much. Just for the committee's sake, we have a draft budget of $18,000 for the study that we need to approve. All those in favor? Opposed? You're good with it? Just for your information, on the 21st, when we return, Minister Ng will be here for an hour, and Minister Champagne will be here for the second hour. So we'll have a full afternoon of witnesses. Okay, thank you very much. So everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I move adjournment. Good. You're welcome.